guys, welcome to the Radiate Your Faith podcast. My name is Maddie Walko, and I'm a college softball player from the great state of Texas. And I'm so excited that you are tuning into the Radiate Your Faith podcast, where I hope you are encouraged to let the light of Christ shine through you in a way that allows people to see God through the way that you walk with Him. My prayer for you is that your faith is deepened, that it is strengthened, and that you are encouraged to radiate your faith. Hey guys, welcome to the Radiate Your Faith podcast. I'm so excited that you guys are joining me for this week's episode. This week, I have a very special guest on. I'm going to go ahead and let him introduce himself to you guys.
Hello, my name is Cody Kingman. I'm a junior here at Angelo State, and I play baseball here.
Yes, so Cody and I met kind of sporadically throughout the semester. He does play baseball here. I play softball here, and we both attend FCA, and we both love Brett. Brett's awesome. He does our FCA, and then we also attend YA at our church. But ever since we've met, I've kind of watched as he has talked about the Lord, and I've just seen such a light in him. And I thought it would be so cool for him to share his story with y'all, which leads us to the topic for today. And do you want to discuss what that is?
So my topic is I went through like an injury, which if you're an athlete, you know that injuries are kind of not good for your mental state and everything that, you put a lot of value in your sport. So what I wanted to do was kind of share like how I found God was still with me, and like when things aren't going well in your life, how do you still treat God and how do you still pursue him? So that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I wanted to share. So I feel like it's a good message.
And I think if you are an athlete, you do understand how injury impacts you. I know last year I had like a really small, like very small knee kind of injury, as in like I'm clumsy and hurt myself. But like even just like the couple weeks that I was out, it was so hard to sit and watch people play and be like, what am I doing? Like, why am I just sitting here? Like, God, what is the purpose of this? And I feel like if you're an athlete and you do love the Lord, you learn a lot through injuries, and God works a lot through that hardship in our lives. And so I think this will be really cool for you to share the story, because I know this is like a big part of your testimony.
Yeah, this isn't like my testimony. It's kind of becoming part of it. It's like, it's adding on. So my freshman year, I was becoming sort of like, I was going to pitch a little bit as a freshman, which was a big deal for me. And then I pitched a little bit, and then I started to get hurt, and then I started to get some pain in my leg, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm probably just, overworking in the weight room or something like that, or I'm running too much. And then, so we have a weekend, I go out to pitch, and I'm not throwing as hard, and I don't feel as good. And then we ride the bus back, which we were in Arkansas, so it was like an 8-hour drive. And then we get back, and then that next week, it got worse and worse and worse. The pain in my leg is almost like I couldn't even like stand up straight all the time. And then so I go to the trainer, I'm like, dude, I'm dying over here. Like, what's going on? And he's like, well, we did some tests on me, and the pain was so bad in like my hamstring, the back, that he thought I had torn my hamstring. So I did rehab on that for about probably a month and a half, and nothing changed at all. I actually was just like eating ibuprofen all the time, like 4 ibuprofen, which is like 800 milligrams, which I think the daily recommended is like 1200. So I was taking 800 every 4 hours every single day for basically almost a year. But what happened after that, after the month and a half of that not working, I go to the real sports doctor. They take an x-ray just to see, just in case something's weird. And they notice that my spine, like my back, is really kind of not straight in one spot. So then I get an MRI, and I have a herniated disc in my L5-S1, which if you take anatomy, you know what I'm talking about. But it's at the bottom of like the whole spine. It's the last one before you get to like your pelvis and like everything that moves, that does all the stuff that does not supposed to move. So it's kind of like the last line of defense. So the typical protocol for that is you have to rehab it with physical therapy, and then they try to like make it, feel better. Maybe it'll fix on its own. Sometimes it doesn't. And then after that, you get a steroid shot in your back to make sure that doesn't, and then that usually works for some people. That didn't work for me. So I rehabbed all the way up until, so I got hurt in like February-ish. I go all the way until July. I call the trainer, I'm like, none of this is working. We're doing surgery, but I'll get to that. So in the spring, not being able to participate, from being in pain, that was incredibly difficult for me. Like you said, watching people play your sport and not getting to play. So I was definitely kind of blindsided by that. But then I had to kind of change. I had about 2 weeks where I was being selfish. And then I was like, well, coach always says the best thing to do is do whatever you can to help the team win, even if you're not playing. So I just was like, okay, I'll just do what I can to help the team win, which is a lot of stuff off the field and during practice and things like that. So trying to find value in those things. But I always like growing up, people would say like, don't put all your identity in your sport. Like I put your identity in Christ. And I was like, yeah, like I love Jesus. Like I don't do that. And then I got hurt and I was like, wait a second, I do, And so then I was like talking with my girlfriend, Victoria, and she was like, well, God wants you to be good at your sport, right? I mean, he loves you. He loves the things that you love. I mean, that are good, obviously. The Bible says that. But like if you want to be like everything you put your hand to, you want to be good at, right? So God's not taking sports away from you because he hates you or he hates your sport, So that kind of opened my eyes to like God was in it with me, like something bad happened, but it was okay. It wasn't like he was punishing me. And so I had thought that for a while, but I mean, I had radiating pain in my back and in my lower butt. I said butt.
Okay.
My hamstring all the way, like every single day, 24/7. I mean, I take ibuprofen. It works for about 3.5 hours. I timed it one time because I took it. It takes 30 minutes to go in, and then at the the mark where it started hurting again, I was like, oh, I take more. So
Fun fact of the day.
yeah, experiencing that was definitely like a really hard mental challenge because I'm just in pain all the time. I'm being short with people. I'm not a happy person to be around, really. I'm just not a good mental space because I mean you're hurt. Nobody wants to be in chronic pain all the time. But going to the Celebration Church Young Adult Services where we met, I learned a lot about how to seek God in your moments where maybe he's not there. It didn't feel like he's there because like feeling God is like sort of like a gray area as far as like, oh, I feel the Holy Spirit today. Like, no, it's just cold and you have goosebumps. Or like you actually feel something. Like it's always up to your experience as far as those sorts of things. And people say different things. But I had heard a story like when Jesus was baptized, he's in the water and he's, the heavens open and the doves flying around and like he's totally in kind of unison with his father. At that point, he's like totally, receiving and he can feel it. And then immediately after that, he goes in the desert and gets tempted for 40 days. So he goes from the water into the desert. And so I think it was Keenan that was talking on Pastor Keenan at the YA. He was talking about how when you're in your seasons of like being in the water and learning, you're preparing for being challenged in the times of when you're in the desert. And so at that point, I was like, well, I'm definitely in the desert at this moment. So I need to kind of, just stay strong and stay firm in my faith and never give up. I'd always told myself I'm never going to let this distance me from God enough to the point where I give up my faith because I didn't want to do that. And I'd read the story of Job in the Bible, and if you haven't read Job, go read Job. But
reading Job right now.
Oh yeah, she's reading Job. Job gets his butt kicked at every part of his life basically, except for there's a joke that his wife doesn't get taken away from him. So say what you can about Job's wife. But, I mean, he never gave up, and he never he cursed himself, and he cursed the day he was born and stuff like that. But he never cursed God for what happened because that was his faith was so much more important to him. I believe if that's what.
Yeah, that is what it says, and it also it's interesting because I'm reading that right now. And he will go stop at nothing to be upset at everything except for the Lord. And he repeats over and over and over again that I would rather be dead than be upset or angry or curse God for what he's doing, because if he's the one who gives, he's also the one who can take away. And so why would I have any say over what he can and can't do?
Yeah. So that's really kind of what I experienced as far as just trying to find the Lord. And obviously I was kind of exposed as far as like, oh, you're not really as Christian as much as you think you are, which that's not a great way to gauge your relationship with God, is how much Christian stuff you do versus how much you don't. But you definitely always are either taking one step closer with him or one step back. You don't really stay in one spot. And so people try to stay in one spot, you're actually probably moving backwards. So learning that kind of throughout being hurt. And then I had my surgery in August. And so the doctor tells me, so basically, well, I need to explain what a herniated disc is. Is that okay? But so a herniated disc, it happens. So your discs are in between your vertebrae, and they're like, shock absorbers in like a truck or a car, when you bounce and they take the force and your truck doesn't explode when you go on a speed bump or something. But what can happen is the outside of the disc can rupture, and the part of the disc on the inside can point out into your spinal column onto your nerves. You have nerves that run all the way down in your spine. And so what happened was my disc was on my nerve and 24/7. And so I'm getting numbness, tingling, and all sorts of pain all throughout my leg, down to my calf, my foot is falling asleep all the time. And so what they do during the surgery is they cut your back open, they go in, and then they shave off that part of the disc sticking out, and then it's off your nerve. So you should be good. Your nerves don't heal very well because they don't have blood in them. It's separate. It's a separate system, but eventually you should be able to heal from all the pain and stuff. So I get out of my surgery the first time in August. I just gave it away, but I have really, really long scar. Like I was like, okay, well, I've never had surgery before. And the doctor told me, he was like, well, your disc was a little tougher than we thought. So I was in there a little bit longer, which if you ever have surgery and your doctor says sees something unexpected, it's not good. So I was like, okay, like whatever. And so August, kind of slowly doing some rehab stuff. I'm coming back. I'm starting to play some catch, starting to work out a little bit. And then I start to feel a little bit of something, but I'm like, oh, that's just my body, like, remembering stuff. And then it starts to get worse. And then one day I'm jogging over, we jog from the baseball field over the weight room, and I'm jogging, at each step, I just feel it like get worse and worse and worse, and to the point where I get across the street and I have to lay on the ground because it was like my disc moved out again. And so I call the doctor. I'm like, I need another MRI, like immediately. And that was, I think, sort of like the end of October coming into November. So about a year ago. And then I get my MRI at the end of November because, it takes a little time. Doctors, especially kind of back then. And then I think it's December. It's the first week of December. It's the last day of class. I go to the doctor, and then literally I'm going from the doctor, I'm driving home to College Station, which it's about 4:45, 5 hours. So I'm at the doctor and I'm like, okay, he's either going to tell me I need surgery or like, what's going on? And he just walks in and he's like, well, you blew it out really bad this time, probably even worse. So we're doing surgery next week. There was no question of we're going to rehab it. There's no question of we're getting a shot, like going right to it. So he showed me the thing on the deal, and it was actually way worse on the MRI. Like it had been bad. So I get my surgery next week. The scar is way smaller this time, but I get out of it the minute I like wake up from surgery and I'm like, conscious enough. I just felt so much peace and finality over the whole everything. Like I know I had just had my second surgery, but I just felt like God was just like, you're done with this part. It's over. And I just had, especially now, because like I'm not in pain all the time. So I could just rest. So he just said, like, you can rest for a portion of time. And so that was incredibly comforting, especially after everything I went through before that. But I actually, the way the scar ended up, because they put some like stitches and glue on it. I have a picture of it, but it is the shape of a cross.
Wow.
The way my scar was.
It's cool.
When I woke up, and it was way tinier. The first one was like this long, and the second one was like that long. So I was like, yeah, he definitely screwed up the first time, but that was pretty cool to see. And then to just kind of be in that season of knowing I was done with the challenges that I've been through at that point was I mean, I was so thankful. And I mean, I would lay in bed at night, like just being thankful to God that I could fall asleep without taking ibuprofen or anything like that, or like just being able to sleep, especially on my back, like or on my side or anything like that. So that was great. But
What do you think you learned about God's character through that?
as far as like him being, I felt like at times that he wasn't caring about me, and I had felt like he was kind of letting me go through that. And I would lay in my truck after practices, like I couldn't really sit, I couldn't do this at all. And so I like had my seat all the way back, and I'm just like praying. I'm just like, heal me, heal me, heal me, like 1,000 times every day. Or like I'm laying in bed and I can't sleep. And I'm like I'm like bent up on my knees, kind of like in a, like a yoga pose, because I can't, I can't bend down and I can't lay on the side. And I'm just like, God, why are you like putting me through this? Like, what is the point of this? And I kept, I didn't really like hear anything from God. And so I just felt so distant from him. And then I like go to church and he's talking about being in the desert versus being in the water. So being really close to God and hearing a lot of things versus him testing your faith. But I found kind of what the meaning of faith was is, can you believe and can you trust God when nothing is like, and you have no idea if it's going to work out or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like, if God answered all your prayers all the time, right when you prayed him, like he can do that, and he does it sometimes, but like, why would you need to have faith in what he's doing in your life if he did it all the time?
Yeah, that's so true. And I think, I mean, with the concept of faith, that's kind of what I've been learning a lot this year is just like we can't make faith our eyes. And sometimes that's really hard because what we do see, like we'll be praying and asking God to help us with something. And then sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. And it's in those moments where it's like, I have no idea how God's going to do this, but I know that if he works all things together for good, he's going to bring something good and glorifying out of this. And it takes a lot of faith and a lot of trust in God's character, the Lord, not leaning on your own understanding to see that he is doing those things and that he's bringing you out of that hardship. Because sometimes you have no idea. How do you think it's impacted your team? Like you having your team watch you go through this?
I mean, I know I haven't like talked to a ton of people about it, because, no one wants to talk about being injured, especially in sports, like you just want to be healthy. But I mean, I've talked to one of my teammates and like, he is always saying like, like you kept getting screwed. Like you got screwed by the trainer when they told you that you had the wrong injury, and you got screwed your first surgery because they didn't do it right. And like, you just keep getting punched in the face, and you just don't give up. And like, why? Like, why would you keep doing that? I'm just like, well, I mean, Job didn't give up. Jesus signed up for the worst death and execution in the history of people.
Yeah.
And he didn't give up. He could have run away, but like, I feel like God has put me on this planet to show who he is and share him through baseball. And that's part of my other testimony. And I feel like that was just a portion of it, like being tough and being the guy that gets through that while being a Christian, like be the Christian that goes through that, because some people like, they get through that and they don't have the faith and they don't, like it's doable, but like, I want to show you that you can do it while believing in the Lord.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I believe there is a verse you would like to share.
Oh yeah. I have my favorite verses that I would like to read for everybody. So I'll just kind of let it go. But Psalm 27 is from David, and I'm not really sure where he is in his, I think this is after second Samuel 16 or 14, I think it's 14, when he he sleeps with somebody else's wife, and then he has that man killed, and then she has a baby, and then the baby is killed. God kills the baby. But then Jesus actually comes out of that, but I'm not going to get into that. But so Psalm 27, he says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me to eat up my flesh, my adversaries and foes, it is they who stumble and fall. Though an army encamp against me, My heart shall not fear, though war rise against me, yet I will be confident. One thing I have asked of the Lord, that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, and to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in his temple. And that's kind of where I mean, the other stuff is good too, but that's kind of where but I've heard a lot of people talk about verse 4 when they say, one thing I've asked the Lord is that I will dwell in his house all my days. But I like the first 3 verses too, but that kind of just keeps me in focus of what is the most important thing, and it is Jesus. And we talked about it at YA the other night, how like in heaven, Jesus is the most important thing. And so keeping that, following David's example, because I mean, he went through a tough time too with, a lot of stuff, but he always kept Jesus in focus and kept in the most important thing. And so that just kind of gives me some stability, and that God is holding me and he's right there, and I can live in his house here on earth and also when I'm not here. So
if any of y'all know me really well, you know that the number 27 is my God wink number. And so he had said he was going to read this, and I was like, no way. But the verse he talks about, I think that does, I mean, it ties together the whole story you just shared of how sometimes God brings us through hardship to remind us what is the one thing that we're seeking in our lives. Are we desiring to dwell in his house all the days of our life? Are we desiring to do what we want and then bring God into it, rather than making God the center and then putting everything else around him? So I really love that you shared that. Do you have anything else you'd like to share before we end the episode?
I mean, always be praying, always seek God by yourself when it's just you and him. I would definitely put that, because that's where your relationship with him is made. It's not where in front of other people, but what you do with when it's just you and him will dictate how you are when you're with everybody else.
So true.
So yeah, that's what I would.
Final point. Well, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, this podcast. If you haven't already, check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, all the things. And if you'd like some merch, we do have a website you can get merch from. But I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode, that you took something away, and that you were encouraged to radiate your faith.